Hey, so tonight I figured I'd kick off by refactoring all of the request messages for the handlers to use the ToggleLocator we created yesterday? Day before yesterday? Whenever. Um, and to make sure I don't miss any, I figured I'd write a test that would effectively say anything that is a request message is not allowed to have a property that is a toggle ID. It must have a toggle locator instead. So I think the way to do this is we could actually use we could use structure maps type scanning, but that might be a bit over the top of this. So what we'll do is just say request rules tests. So these are just going to be some generic tests we can apply and say, you know, this isn't allowed, or everything must have one of these, that kind of thing. So let's start off with a test method. All requests must not have a toggle ID property. Actually, let's write it slightly different. We'll say all requests must have a toggle locator instead of toggle ID. Now, this means that we can also have things that have got both on them. That's fine. We just don't want to have a... Well, not that I can actually think of a situation where you'd want both, but potentially in the future you might want to be able to link two toggles together, I guess. Anyway, so we'll do some type scanning to do this. So first off, we need a type in the relevant assembly. So in our case, that's the domain assembly. And as it's the domain assembly and we're looking for toggle locators, we'll start by using the toggle locator. We'll say type of toggle locator get assembly. There we are. So now that we have the assembly, we can now find all types. Get all exported types, that's what we're after. So we don't want private or internal types because they're not going to be sent via the UI anyway. So we're only going to get ones that have actually been exposed outside the assembly. Which I think what this does. I know it's the method I always use, but it gets public defined in this assembly that are visible outside the assembly. Yeah, exactly what we're after. So find all the types where the type... now we need to check if the interfaces contain the iRequestHandler one. So we'll say t.getInterfaces. Now we need to get the interface without its implementation, because it's a generic interface. And I think the easiest way to do that we can just compare it by name actually. Contains... Actually, we'll use any because then we can get this. Oh, any. Say I dot. Hopefully that's... I'm not sure if that's going to be the genericified version or not. Okay, we'll just try this anyway. Name of I request. That. I'm sure that used to work. Ah, you have to specify the types. Ugh. Right, I'm just going to hardcode it for now because I'm not convinced this is going to work anyway. That. Var requests. What's that? it's only going to be the where statement that breaks. So. Right, requests should not be empty. Oh, let's also do this first. We'll say where the T is class and is abstract is false. So classes we can create an instance of, basically. I don't want to add a type later that as a base class for the messages and have everything blow up because it it doesn't have the relevant properties. I suspect this is going to fail. Yeah. Right, so we need a way of getting whether something contains a generic interface implementation. Now I know I have done this before, but I just can't remember how. Oh well, let's ask Stack Overflow. Go away. C#. Check if type implements generic interface. That's what we're after. Without considering the type parameters. That's the one. So find all the interfaces where the interface is a generic, get the generic base definition of it, check that it contains that. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Upvotes everyone. And even better, we're not going to be using random strings everywhere. So, get interfaces. The interfaces or interface map. So, yeah, where I is generic. Get generic type definition contains. Interface. Yeah, okay. So now get generic type definition. So this is the actual type that you're closing on you're constructing. Any contains type of I request I request of anything. Is his problem? Request. That one. Oh, I request doesn't have a comma in it, does it? So let's rename that to type and split this into some lines so that it's vaguely readable. But we might split that into a separate method. Yeah, I think so. So we take that bit. Now, last time I tried this with ReSharper, it didn't do a particularly smart refactoring. So we'll just say implements type of my request. And then we create a private static bool implement type. That could, if I could keyboard. Yeah, there we go. Just need to replace that with the arguments. There, and it even reads kind of nicely. Type is a class, is abstract, or is not abstract, sorry, and implements one of these. It should not be empty. So hopefully this time we run it, this test will now pass. And then we can move on to actually checking the types have got the required things in them. Oh, that's annoying. So let's look at one of our requests. Let's do a get toggle request. It's public. It's not abstract. It is a class. So, rather than bashing at this repeatedly, we're going to use all of this stuff just a little differently. We'll just say, yeah, okay, I've seen the error. I'm only passing one type into here. Should probably pass two. Type look for. That's more like it. On the plus side, we now know our assembly doesn't contain any types which implement themselves. That's better. Right, so now that we've got that working, we then refactor this slightly. This bit comes up here, and we now say private. No, actually this needs to be public. Public static IEnumerable. Oh, wrong type. IEnumerable of object array all requests. And we can take this, inline that there, like that, and on here we say dot select type, and we need a new object array, which just contains the type. Is casting. Right, now this can be changed to be a theory, and then we can use member data, name of requests, and now in here we can say type request. Now that we've done that, we'll just add a small test that will check that this actually works. So we'll just do fact. There should be requests. Doesn't have to do very much, this one, just to check that we can actually detect requests. because by using a theory in a member data, if this static method returns no results, then this test just won't run at any times, so you won't get any failures. So not be empty. Now we're assured that we actually have something to test, and then tests that run on it. Right, so now that we've done that, now we need to look at the properties on this. So we'll just say request get properties, which should be public instance based ones by default. Should not contain properties. Yeah, where prop dot property type equals type of toggle ID. So this is checking that we have a toggle ID. So should be empty. And that'll technically do. I mean, we're not checking that it's got a locator, we're just checking that it doesn't have a top property ID. Do we want to also check that every one of them has a locator? No, because not everything does have a locator. Creating a toggle, for instance, doesn't come with a locator. Yeah, that'll do. There must not have a toggle ID. Now this one should fail. And let's do this to an expression body. There we go. That one should fail because I have many requests that do have toggle IDs as their parameters. So this will give us a nice output of all of the ones that fail, which tells me which ones need refactoring and means I won't miss any of them, assuming this test does actually work. There we go. So we have got a get toggle request and a get toggle by name request. Sorry, update toggle state one. Yeah, that sounds about right. So let's commit that. So that's our test. Let's say tests. Your all request objects don't wait by toggle ID. Right, now we're going to break lots of things. So one of those, let's pick one of these to do. We had a get toggle request, so let's fix that one first. Oh, thank you for the host, Yulo. Right, so, yep, as the test pointed out, we have a toggle ID here, but as we're wanting to be able to support loading by both name and ID, we now need to replace this with a ToggleLocator. And the ToggleLocator comes in through the parameter, the constructor. Or would do if I could type. You'd think, considering the amount of typing I do all day, every day, that I'd be able to type by now with some level of confidence, but apparently not. Right, so now that we've changed that, the handler will break. Because this one is doing magic to find the toggle by name or by ID. So we're also going to, while we're at it, just delete this by name request entirely because we don't need it anymore. Remove the interface definition off here. And delete the bodies of these. Yep, don't need any of that. So this is going to return a toggle view. So we now just say view equals message locator dot locate view session, and this locate view in this case will either resolve to this one, which will grab it via the ID, or it will resolve blast. I have no idea how I got that keybind to appear. Oh well. So it'll either resolve to the locating of the view by name or by ID, just by the fact that this locator can be either of the types. So here we can now just say the view. Voila. Right, so that's the easy bit. There's probably some more errors because the controllers are going to be calling this, but first off we have our handler. So rather than passing a toggle ID in directly, we now have to say toggle locator create. And let's just copy that. Go to the next one. And here we now have a get toggle request. That's some really interesting auto-completion. And we just create a toggle locator again by name this time. That's really weird. Right, those fixed. Right, now let's go back to the API itself. This now will not be happy because we have many things that are loading toggles, and now they no longer can just call these directly. But we also can delete half of these methods as well, because our routing, thanks to the model binder we implemented yesterday, now supports, rather than having a GUID and a string parameter, we can just directly put toggle locator ID here. That now just takes the ID, and we no longer need this name method. So we now have both routes supported by a single method. So now we need to do the same for anything else. We have state fetching, so we don't need the one by name. But we do need two of these. And that is now a toggle locator. Right, another one done. And one more. See, we've already got these ones dealt with. And we don't actually have a name variety for this one. We could also actually go in and add a test that would say anything, any root method, any action method, which takes in, must have two root parameters on it if it takes in an ID of some form. Because I want all roots to be able to be supported by both name and ID. Right. Now that we've done that, we now need to fix the controllers tests. Oh, go away. Right, so that no longer exists. Oh, a minute. Now, we have a toggle ID here, but what we actually want is a toggle locator. and that needs a toggle ID. We can just do create new rather than parsing a GUID. Well, I mean, which internally create new is just calling a GUID, but and we can now say where the, actually this is a locator. So the locator for this message should be the same instance as that. Yeah, so calling this get method on the controller should result in a get toggle request being emitted that contains the relevant locator. So we'll create a toggle locator here. Yeah, let's rename it. And this is no longer that, it is a get toggle request. Don't technically need to do this test because it is testing the same path, but we've got a variant by name and by ID. So that should be all of our compilation errors out the way. No, 2 more. Right, by name request doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. Excellent. More deletion. Isn't deleting code fun? Ah, yes, and we rewrote tags. It looks like we're going to be missing some tests. Right. Right, when we get a toggle request with this particular toggle ID, so let's say locator. Now, this is going to be interesting to test, because we're trying to return a specific view. But locator doesn't expose its view, or its ID, anywhere. And we need to be able to send either that response, this response. So, I think what we'll do is create 2 locators, one valid and one invalid. Yeah, I think that should work. So, where is this toggle ID used? Apart from in the view. It is used to request things. So we no longer actually care about that. Go in there. In fact, we can just create a new one off the bat instead. Let's delete that. And before we do anything else, we will now create our 2 types. We'll have hi, Shando, is it pronounced? So valid locator equals toggle locator create exist, and we'll have an invalid locator I don't exist. Let's make those fields. I'm still not entirely used to this keyboard, so not helping my typing in any way. Right, so now we can say when you get a valid toggle data, we could put a clause on this one now saying when given an invalid one, but let's not. So now you say get tags valid locator should result in a locator which equals valid. When fetching tags by ID which doesn't exist, invalid locator. locator should be invalid. Don't need that anymore. Yeah, that looks about right. And that's not used externally anywhere. Yeah, sounds about right. Right. I'm going to ignore these tests for the time being because I just want to fix what I've compiler broken. But we should come back and fix those anyway. This seems to have basically the same structure. So this is for fetching states. The other one was for fetching tags, I think. Get single toggles tags. Yeah. Basically the same structure. So we can do the same thing again. I think we can get rid of those. Probably. See in a minute. We don't need that anymore. That can be create new. That can be an inline variable. Now we want our underscore valid data equals. You know what? I'm just going to copy it. Let me bother to type that. Yep. And then make those into fields. Keep meaning to play around with there's a plugin for ops which will let me show all of the keyboard shortcuts or keyboard entry that I do. I don't know if I can make it only show keyboard shortcuts when I'm holding like the control or the alt key down, because I wouldn't want it to show every key press because, you know, I'm typing quite a lot and that would be, yeah, quite a lot of things on screen. So when there's a valid locator, return that. So when you return a valid one, the locator should be valid and the response should be a state view. When fetching a state doesn't exist, invalid. The locator should be an invalid one. Yeah. So when fetching by name, now we're not actually making any differentiation between this. We've only got one method. So actually, I can delete these. Because it doesn't matter whether this is name or ID, it's still a toggle locator. We're not testing the implementation, we're just checking that the right message type comes out and that we get the right kind of response. So yeah, not going to bother with those tests. No point in having tests which don't provide any added value. Right, that should be all of our compilation errors out the way now. Let's wait for that to compile and then run all of the tests in the solution and see how much stuff I've actually broken. Build succeeded. There's a plus. Now run the tests. Just minimize these folders so we can actually see everything. Ryder's presentation mode has gone really weird since I've started using a much higher DPI monitor. I might have to mess about with the scaling settings to try and get it to display more pleasantly. Oh, we have one failed. Ah, yes, that's our other request type which we haven't fixed yet. So that's still got a toggle ID. So let's have a look at what we've done. Just diff it, make sure I've not added any bad whitespace in. Probably have. Oh, I haven't. That's nice. So get toggle. Remove refactor to use toggle locator. Right, now let's do the next one. And I think the last one of that. So what type was it complaining about? Update toggle state request. Now this is going to be an interesting one to do because my next plan is to completely rewrite how updating of state works, because it's really not very RESTful and also not valid in HTTP terms, because I implemented a delete method that took in a request body of things to remove, which would be fine, except the HTTP spec says you're not allowed to send a request body with a delete method. So I need to fix that. So as with the other one, we shall just replace the toggle ID with a locator. So locator. It seems a bit weird to be doing this when I know for a fact that I'm about to get rid of it. Hey ho. So into our state handler. So here we're loading the aggregate. This just needs updating to be message.locator locate aggregate. Get rid of all of that. Pass the session in instead. That was nice and easy. Right, let's fix the tests for the handler first. So these are all passing in a toggle ID. Are they doing anything magical with the ID, or is it just being ignored? Yeah. Come to think about it, why hasn't this broken for other things? Ah, because it's all only used by that one type. What are we doing here? Oh, we're creating a locator for each time. So let's refactor that at the same time. And we'll just replace this toggle ID with a locator, which is already set up. I am developing a RESTful event-sourced feature toggling service for fun and no particular reason. Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know of what feature toggling is, it's a method of hiding features of your application. So in the case of this product, you'll deploy this service somewhere, and then your main application will call out to this to check whether a feature is enabled for everyone or a particular user or a group of users. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's called Crispin because you can do canary releases. So people who are in a certain user group might receive a different build of your software to everyone else, hence canary releasing. As a child, we had a cockatiel, which is not quite a canary, but he was called Crispin, so that's why I called this project Crispin, because I needed a name, and I like Crispin as a name. Yeah, I thought it was quite a good idea. It's quite nice to have a series to focus on as well. In fact, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago at a local conference about my experience of streaming this, because it's been very interesting to do. I've learned lots, and apparently it makes me able to concentrate a lot more. Although I am just bumbling around at the moment. Let's make that a field. Read-onlyness. Oh, that looks horrible. Right, that'll do. And the reason I want that as a field... Oh, I don't... do I need it as a field? No, I don't. because I've got the toggle available, so I can just stick a dot in there and that'll get rid of my error. Right. This should have caused a bunch more errors now. Yes, it has. Because this toggle ID no longer exists. The locator does. That. Right, and now this one. But this one's slightly different in that we didn't notice that it was doing magic like that, so that should be the tests and the handler done, so now we've just got the REST API. ID name, it's JetBrains Rider. It is IntelliJ based, I think. And yeah, it does .NET, cross-platform, and I like it. What do we have here? Toggle IDs. Yeah. Right, so that now gets a duplicated root. It's got the same keyboard shortcuts as Visual Studio as well, if you configure it like that. So the only downside to it is a lack of local IIS integration, which is why I use this most of the time at work, but because we use a lot of local IIS rather than IIS Express, I can't use Rider for those bits. But apart from that, it's great. And as I already had a ReSharper subscription, adding this to my subscription really wasn't that expensive. What the heck is going on there? Are you even casting as well like that? Stinks of auto-generated code. Don't need this question mark there anymore, really. Right. Should be those out of the way, which now means we have errors in our controller tests, as they are checking the toggle IDs. Do they need to even check the toggle ID? Should be ToggleLocator, what I'm going to call that one. That ToggleLocator equals ToggleLocator. Let's make I'm not quite sure I follow you. What do you mean by what makes root? To do the same for this one as well. Toggle ID, great new. Should probably change the type of that as well. Yeah. Okay, so the fact attribute comes from XUnit, which is the test framework I use, and just marks that that is a test to be executed by the test runner, and the root attribute is provided by ASP.NET Core. Because I'm using attribute routing, which I've grumbled about many times because I don't really like it, but yeah, so that just lets me specify roots with a template, and thus I'm able to make all of my roots have two of them, or all of my methods should have two roots associated with them. And as you can see, these icons in the side here appearing with the XUnit test thing, that's because there's a fact method, a fact attribute. If I remove that, no more test. Right. I think that should be all our compile errors out of the way. Good, right, let's rerun the tests. Hopefully, no failures this time. I should have gotten all of the requests. I might manually check them to make sure there aren't any weird. Although there can't be. Because they have to have public properties, which have to be of the type, and we're finding all requests and checking that they don't have the property. Right, run all tests. Oh, this one seems to be working. Gonna have to rewrite those root tests, they're horribly slow. One handler test failed. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So what we actually needed here was a different locator. Locator create. Let's rename that. Let's call it invalid locator. It's because I don't really want to have that. It should not contain. Can't really check for that. That can go away as an assertion. Yeah, that'll do. Rerun the tests in this class. Much better. Right, so now we have all of our tests passing. Let's just check we've not added any bad white space. Nope. Right, git add. Help if I typed the dot as well. It's and which request was this? Update toggle date. Update refactor to be toggle locator based. Right. So now if we actually go and look at our controllers, you should see that all things, well, that one doesn't, because it doesn't actually have a root associated with it. All of the actual methods that do things have two roots associated with them, which means they all work by name and by ID. The fact, you mean the fact method names? Yeah, you do tend to write them out a bit strangely, fact methods, because depending what test runner you're using, it'll on the output replace the underscores with spaces for you. So your tests actually read like sentences at that point. But yeah, it's only fact methods that I write like that. Right, so now we've done that, I've mentioned a few times that I need to refactor the state handling because done something, well, that's not valid. So our root for state is currently this. But what I am thinking of doing is leaving the get in place and removing all of this in favour of a lot of other methods. So the roots are going to be something along the lines of, let's just write it out with that one. So put, so if you do state slash default, say, now you either need to be able to specify an on or an off. So I think we'll do a body for that, state, and then you'd either say on or off, and then we'd have the same thing but for user ID. You can do an on or off, and the same thing for groups. Now this is explicitly setting toggle on or off. We also have the ability to deset a toggle, just to remove the fact that it's had something set on. So this will be delete. Let's just shorten it to that because that reads a bit better for now. And you won't pass anybody in that because you're not allowed to. So these are going to be our 6 methods. You know, I don't think we're going to support deleting to the default state because you have to have default state. And we should probably have a group ID rather than a user ID here. Yeah, that looks reasonable, I think. I'm not convinced about the body being a JSON body that you can submit state on or off to. But the other alternative is having a root of like active, and that being true or false, 1 or 0, that kind of thing. But that feels a lot less restful. So I don't really know which one you're supposed to do, but so I'm going to do that. Now, hopefully we won't need to actually modify our handlers very much. I'm not certain yet. So let's start with default state because that's the easiest one. So we shall do a root for ID. We'll do the same again, but for name. And then it's a public async task of I action result. And this is going to be get. No, this is put state default. And this takes in a toggle locator ID and from body. I hate this so much. Some kind of model. Call it a state put request. That model. I really don't like having to put that attribute there. I don't like attributes in general, to be honest. But hey, that's a lost battle. So our model is just going to have a single state property, somewhat like this one. A public. You know what? We don't need that delete state model. Or post request. Yeah, that needs to. Right. So we'll have public class that. Public toggle state get set. That's our enumeration, which should just have two values to it. No, that's clearly the wrong one. It's states I'm after. That's the enumeration, which is either off or on. So given that, we now say var request equals new update toggle state request. Should be for a given locator. And then we have some values to set. I'm beginning to think I might split these out into separate messages. Let's go and have a look at the handler and see what that does. Update toggle state handler. Yeah, you see, these are... Could make a single handler which does all of them, and then just you get to pick a method which then does the rest of the work. Decisions. Or I could just use this to start with and then refactor again afterwards. That sounds like a better idea. More typing to start with. More typing? No more typing. So anonymous equals model state. Yes. And that, delete that, delete that. So var response equals mediator send request. Don't need an await in front of that. And then we return a new JSON result response state. Yeah, and that's the only bit that's going to change between each one of these methods. Now, what tests have we got that have broken? Post and delete. Well, we don't actually have post anymore. Yeah, these are quite invalid, so I'm going to delete these to start with. We have a toggle state controller somewhere. We have a base class for this, so we can write more tests for it. So we'll write some more up-to-date tests that actually reflect what we're doing. So this is you know what, let's just put them all in one class. Do that. Toggle state control tests. Right, there we go. Yeah, we'll leave it like that. So, fact, when putting default state, do we need to do anything interesting here? Because our controller looks like this. Probably needs a proof. Well, you pass null in there, you're going to get a null reference exception. Which we'll probably need to protect against somehow. I'm not quite sure how I want to do that protection, because I don't want to have to put something along the lines of if model is null on every action. Just want to be able to pass it in and not worry about it. And just have a bad request come back if they don't provide a model. I wonder if I could use a decorator that would check for any parameters that have from body on them. and then automatically check if they're null, and if they're null, just return. Maybe. We'll look at that later anyway. So we just need to prove that default state can be put. Yeah, it'll do for now. So controller, wow, not that. Controller, put default state. And given a toggle locator and some model. Let's create a locator and keep that. Yeah, locator equals toggle locator, create toggle ID, create new field, be read only. To be honest, that's, can you not just refactor these completely just to a field? Oh well, we'll just do that. Underscore mediator, underscore controller. And recreate the controller field. Read only. Right. So now we have a locator to pass in. So I suppose we should also check that when given a non-existing locator, you get a 404 back. New request, and we'll pick a state. On. Now on. Alright. Await. Our response equals that. Do that. And that. Response. Now. How am I testing other things? Yeah, let's go for that one. Just casting it to the JSON result and then checking that we got the right type back. Because we're not wanting to test the actual handler and such returns the right information, because we have handler tests to do that. We just want to check that we're getting the right content of result. So at the moment, this JSON response could be anything. But in our case, we want to say that the value should be of type something. So when we do that, we're expecting a state view back, I think it is. Yeah, not the response itself. So when I first implemented these, I made some mistakes, and rather than returning the property of the response object, I was returning the response object, which is perfectly valid to do, but it meant that I was getting extra properties and things back into my HTTP responses, which I didn't want. So instead, I'm just going to assert that I get the right kind of response. What that response contains, that's up to the handler test to validate. And we should also validate that the mediator received the right kind of response. I don't want to have to implement that every time, so what we can do is say, I can never remember quite how to do this. I want to say when no returns. Yeah, okay, so mediator send arg.any, and it's an update toggle state request. When we receive one of these, returns a new response, which we will, no, not quite. Save our response, new toggle, update toggle state response. And we'll fill in what that contains in a minute. But we can also then say and does, and now we have a callback. So what I want to do in every one of the tests that I implement is check that the request that was sent has the right properties set on it. So given a call info object, I can say call info arg update toggle request. That's going to get me the first argument of that type, of which there is only one. And what we're going to do is set a field to that, which can't be read-only, but let's move that up here. Actually, we don't need the mediator to be exposed at all. Name it. And we'll have a response of some form. Better make it actually have a view because we want to check that we get that type back. State view equals new state view. I wonder if auto fixture supports. Oh, what am I trying to think? Yes, I like auto fixture for generating my test data, but it doesn't support .NET Core yet, I don't think. It is on the roadmap, but I don't know if they've actually released it yet. I think it's 4.0 that it, yeah, it's 4.x that'll contain it, so gotta wait, which means I have to manually create things. So I'm just going to leave it empty because I'm not asserting on the content of that, I'm just asserting the type is there and that it's not null. So now that we've got this, whenever a request comes through, we can now say underscore request dot anonymous should be on states dot on request dot users should be empty, and request groups should be empty. And because I've got multiple assertions in one test, shouldn't technically do, should satisfy all conditions. Now this method will mean it'll, rather than running these in order, and if the first one fails you don't get to see the results of the next three, by using this extension and making these into lambdas, it'll run all of them even if any of them fail, and then give you a single exception at the end. Summarizes all the failures that have occurred. That. So in fact that one should pass, I think. Just wait for that to build. What? Okay. Yeah, alright then. Yes, alright. Test to these. Actually, we can just move these into our class. Delete that. Put that in our working tests class. And what do we need to do? Controller needs to become underscore control. That needs to be locator. And it looks like we do need to expose mediator outside of the constructor then. That's an invalid locator, which is only used for this one. So we'll just create a new one of those. Right, getting that. So now, apparently I do need this, so extractor field. Initializing the constructor, make it read-only. Now means I want to move that line down because it's nice to have things grouped together. That now is a locator. That's an invalid locator. That has an underscore and a lowercase m. Likewise there. And that type should be imported. Right. Now hopefully everything passes. Fingers crossed. So, is this one running? Oh, they all fail. Test class may only define a single public constructor. Well, yes. Ha! Okay, it's protected from where it was a base class. Whoops. Alright, try that again. And these tests, this compilation is so slow, so slow when OBS is running as well. Right. Well, when putting works, but fetching state does not. And why? Ah, because I haven't set mediator up to return anything for that. Suppose I should do, really. Luckily, we don't need to do anything particularly interesting for it. When we have a get toggle request, I'm going to return a new get toggle response. We need a particular view type. Yes, we need a state view. And a toggle view anyway. There we are. Oh, and that needs a state. Yeah, it's a state view it uses. Oh, which auto calculates. Okay, so we don't need to actually set anything on that. Lovely. Oh, where's my syntax highlighting gone? Let's try that again. Should be null, but wasn't. Okay. So is where the request equals locator. Otherwise, return blank result. Oh well, tests aren't quite as focused as I wanted, but it'll do. Please wait while this takes 3 days to compile. The resource monitor open somewhere. Right, good. Now all those pass. Now we can go back to our controller and go back to doing interesting things. Or we can add our missing test here. Basically the same as that. And the toggle doesn't exist. You know what? Let's use an invalid locator by creating a second one. Right, when it doesn't exist, when given an invalid locator. Which also means I can use the invalid locator there instead. Right. So when using an invalid locator, we don't want to check all of that because we're covering it in another test. We just want to check the response value should be null. Because that will then be picked up by our decorator, which will turn it into a 404. Right. Now we've done that, let's do the others. Should just be a case of a little bit of copy pasta. Let's only do one of them first. Right, so users. And you need to specify a user ID here. But state user. Yeah, there's definitely going to be some refactoring coming up. Good. String user ID, I think. Right, and instead of doing that, I'll just say, yeah, this is definitely going to get changed. Now we have to pass a user ID. And then it gets model date. Oh, we need more brackets than that. Many brackets. Should probably do that. Yeah. It's basically the same for each one now. So that's users. And groups is the same. But instead of a users root, we now have groups. A group ID. And a different name. That can be a group ID. And that's groups. So that's why I want to refactor, because this is handling multiple and I'm only actually going to handle one at a time. I think maybe I will let it be multiple. Right, that's those two done. So now for tests. Can I make these tests slightly more generic? Really? But we can just copy and paste them. It's basically the same thing other than the method name changes. Which means no, and the assertion changes as well. Yeah. Easiest thing is to copy and paste them because they are similar but different. Putting user state. Put state user. It's a really weird autocomplete. Yeah, similar methods, but not quite the same. Now we need a user ID. That. Oh no, on the string, don't I? And then here, this should be null. Now we want to check that the users only have a single item. Good. Contain key and value. And key and value are user ID, parse, user ID. And the value is states.on. And we shall also prove there is only one. Should contain single. Sure that was a single. Should have single item. Yeah. Right, and then for the same for this, we just have that. And we'll do the same for groups as well. Because they're so similar methods. The amount of code I'd have to write to factor them out to not have any repetition. It's what's making me not factor them out to have less repetition. But group put state. And this time it's groups should contain a single item and the users should be empty. And that's obviously a group ID. Right, let's see how much of this works. Hopefully this will all pass. Nope. Hang on a minute, I think... Yep, okay. That makes sense. So where I've set up a default response for getting a toggle, I need a default response for updating as well. Do that. This. And here we, instead of just matching on any argument, we just say it needs to be that needs to be an update toggle response. Yeah, so here we say the request has to match the locator. I would if I could delete. Thank you. Right. Rerun again. Wait 3 years for the tests to compile. Maybe I should do more JavaScript work, at least that runs instantly. Excellent. No bad white space, I hope. There isn't. Excellent. What's the name of the controller? Toggle state controller. Toggle state controller. New putting or writing date. So now that we've done put routing, probably should do deletes as well. Now we only have to support deletes for 2 routes. I'm just going to copy that part of the method. This is going to be a delete method, so we'll rename it delete state. And here the request, request, not a quest. I can't actually remember what the name of the request type is. We don't have one. Let's have a look at this then. Just specify as null. Yeah, I'm definitely refactoring this. I don't like that at all. In fact, we can just copy this. Actually, let's copy the user one, because it is identical, almost. Except because we don't get a body, we don't need this parameter. And we put null as the value, and that signifies that we want to remove whether the state has been set or not. And that's why I don't like it. So I'll do the same for that. And this is delete, which is an HTTP delete. Doesn't have a body because you're not allowed one. To that we then put a null here. Yeah, I don't like this at all. And we've now handled the delete case as well. Yeah, don't like that. So, go back down to these. And we shall do one for deleting states. So when removing user state, delete, so you don't get the request body, remove that. And the state here should be null. We'll do the same for groups as well. Don't get that. That's delete. Then removing, and that should be null. I could type, which evidently still can't. Right, I think that should be everything to make those pass. And now it means our API is actually slightly more RESTful than it was before. And, you know, valid. I still find it a bit weird that you can't put a request body with the delete method. I feel it should be allowed, but hey, maybe not. Well, nothing I can do about that. Yay, so now we have delete supported as well. And we'll just use the same commit method, commit, new, delete, routing. Cool. Right. Now the other thing I've been thinking of refactoring, I'm not sure if I want to start it now though, is if we go to the state controller, is here we've got these strings for group IDs. I'd quite like to be able to just pass the relevant type in and have group ID and user ID, because then I think I could cover these all with one method. Which means we'd need to write another one of these binders. Because I could say, if it's a ToggleLocator, or if it's a user ID, then we'll create a user ID. If it's a group ID, we'll create a group ID, otherwise we won't do anything. and then it'll fall back to the other implementations. Or I can refactor the handler a bit to split my message types out. And while splitting the message types out would be more pleasant from the handler's perspective, one method to do that one method to do this one method to do that one, it does mean that my tests here and then need, well, instead of these two, I'd need another 4 definitions. Unless I could refactor that. No, because there's a single request to last. Oh well, this one looks more fun to do anyway. Let's try doing a separate binder. So let's copy the existing binder and then refactor the hell out of it. So we're going to call this I don't know, a domain ID binder, because I'm going to handle many different types. So we shall say private static read-only type array supported types equals new array of things, which will be type of toggle ID, type of group ID, and type of user ID. So now instead of that, we now say if supported types contains that. I'm sure that reads much better, to be honest. Yeah, oh well. Right. We then do the same test again on the binding context model type. We grab the relevant value and then we comment that out. Oh, I've had a much better idea. Let's make this into a dictionary. A dictionary of type func of that type. Its first value. I think it's a string. It is. So it's a func of string object. It's not going to be called supported types anymore. It's going to be called builders. So builders is a new dictionary without that gumph. I'll do that. Would you stop that? And then value. And obviously I'm going to replace that value with something actually useful. Now that'll do. So now that we have that, we can now say another bracket there. Builders.keys. No, we can do, no, actually we can do document. Oh, damn it. Contains key. builders contains key that false. Right. So now we say var builder equal builders binding context all type then we can just say binding context result equals model binding result. Oh, bin equals not a plus. No. Success. I'm assuming builder value. Oh, value dot first value. Right. And then instead of this, we now say a toggle ID is toggle ID bars good bars value. Quite sure what kind of error that will give, but group bars, because a group ID can be anything. But I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to support that one to start with. It's only these ones I really care about because the rest of the API doesn't expose toggle IDs anymore. It just exposes toggle locators. Right, so now that we have that, should probably write some tests for it. Start up. Options.model binder providers that one new that. Now, if I'm right, which I might be, my toggle state controller now directly take in a user ID. Oh. Yeah. Let's fix that test. The one that actually fails is so we can take that user ID, specify the user ID directly. That, take that, put that there. Right, now while the test will pass, that won't actually tell us if this actually works or not. The only way to know that is to actually run the thing and stick a breakpoint on that. Now, I'm not going to bother actually creating a toggle, just going to call this delete method straight off the bat and just see what's in the user ID. Hopefully it'll have a value, as will the toggle locator. Unless I've got something wrong, in which case either one of them, both of them will be null, or I'll get exceptions from MVC being chucked around. Now while that's launching, we can launch Riders test Restful service. So it's toggles by ID. Actually we'll use name because then I don't have to actually try and make it good. Name what state users John, and this is the delete method, so I don't even have to provide a body, which is even better. Send. Oh, so we should have that, which should contain WAT as the ID. There's the inspector. Yep, toggle name of WAT. And we should get the user ID of John. Hooray! So our mapper actually works. So now that we have a working one of those, I should probably write some tests to check that it keeps working. Like it's likely to break, although it could do if I try and implement the toggle ID provider on it. So let's take that, drop down to our tests. Class finder tests. Yeah, let's do. Oh, let's create a constructor. Have binder equals new one of those. Import missing references. Make a field. Make it read only. Right, now let's have a fact. When parsing a type not supported, or even supported, fact, when parsing a valid user ID, when parsing a valid group ID, and there's actually no such thing as an invalid user ID or group ID because they don't do any validation. They just turn a string into a typed object. Right, so let's go to this binder because I'm about to do a pain in the backside setup for it. Right. Import everything. Let's see if we can't simplify this. So, we also need the value provided version, which is that. Right. Can I build this? Yes. If I do that, rm extractor method, yes, called build context, and then give it a type and a string value. That now becomes type of t. That gets the value. Don't need that. That can just be a return statement. So now that we have that, build context. Right, this is for something not supported. So an int, say, and a value of, doesn't really matter. Cannot resolve bind model async. I bet you can. I can't resolve the type at all because I've moved it into a different file. Right. Right, so bind model async. So this is a user ID, so we'll give it a user ID and let's say var id GUID new GUID to string. That. This should be a user ID. Actually, we don't even need to check the type because we're just going to should be user ID parse ID. And the same but for group IDs. Make that async. That. Move this to the bottom. And run. Okay, right. Now we have a much better model binder. So let's do that. Let's add. I don't know how to say git extract files. Don't know how to do that. Just wanted to filter it to show only the untracked. Oh well. Crispin.rest tests infra and infra. Bad white space. And why is there a link method being added to that? We don't need system link. Right, that's better. Rest. Add domain the binder for the group. Oh, let's add the startup as well. The commit. Right. Now we can go into our toggle locators, or our controller, sorry. And find anything that mentions a user ID or a group ID, which should only be these, come to think of it. Here, except model.state. I use this one. Do that as well. Replace this with a nice strong type. And fix our compiler errors. Not that one, because it's not a real error, it's either not being able to find something. So this is a user. User ID pass. User ID pass that. Now you don't need to be that anymore. Group ID. That. That gets deleted. Stronger typing, better errors, compiler errors as well, and less typing. Almost perfect, really. Right, let's run all the tests. And then I'm going to call it a night and go and do a nice late night gym session and pick heavy things up and put them down again. Come on, I told you to run tests, not just build. Hopefully they'll all pass. Well, let's assume they are while I commit everything. Toggle state controller use strong typed user and group IDs. And they did pass, even better. Right, push that up to GitHub. So yeah, that's it for this evening. Managed to get quite a bit done. Yeah, if you've got any questions or want to check out the code, it's on GitHub, github.com/ponderdom/Crispin. And if you've got any questions, feel free to send me a message on Twitter, which I'm at Ponderdom on that as well. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you next time.